think you can get it. You're a great manager.
Okay, we are going to call to order the town of Telluride, Colorado, town council budget meeting. It is Thursday, October 3rd, 2024. It is 9:03 a.m. and we are live in person in Rebecca Hall, but hybrid as well. First topic to tackle is a roll call, and starting to my right.
Ellen 11.
Geneva Shawnette.
Me and Fee.
Dan Enright.
And Teddy Erico, and on Zoom.
Jesse Ria Arguez.
Ashley Von Sprecken.
Great. Item number 1 on the agenda is work session and discussion of general funds and revenue estimates and fees. And we have Kaylee and Zoe here to present.
I'll just start it off by saying a big thank you to staff, of course, for putting this together. The general fund is the topic for today. I think there'll be some opportunities where we start to quickly discuss other funds, but I just want us to keep with the general fund as we have other opportunities to talk about the other funds at another time. So with that, Kaylee, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. We'll just go over some of our big revenue sources and how we would like to budget for those for 2025. And then some of our expenses that kind of affect the whole general fund. And then we'll let each department go over their requests and any changes in fees that they have requested for 2025. The goal of the budget process is to create a balanced budget for the town to use as operating guidelines for the year. A balanced budget is when recurring revenues equal or exceed recurring expenditures, and this ensures long-term financial sustainability. Colorado requires that cities and towns prepare, present, and maintain balanced budgets. If additional revenues are required to balance the budget, new revenue sources must be approved or fund balances drawn down. Our fund balance reserves for our general fund, we currently have town council adopted financial planning policies that state that the general fund should hold reserves of at least 30% of our expenses. This target has been as high as 35 in the past. Staff would definitely recommend that go no lower than 35% in the future. And the 2025 budget in front of you has a fund balance reserve of 63.2% reserves, or $10.8 million, which is approximately 6 months of operating expenses. That is a net loss of $532,000. And then we have identified some one-time expenditures. The master plan, which is a total of $350,000, we have a grant of $150,000. So the delta on that is $200,000 coming out of the general fund. That's just a one-time expense. The gondola fall extension of $138,000, we're assuming that will not be a recurring expense depending on what happens this fall. And then a project manager, which is a FTE we have added for the 2025 budget year. But it's just a 2-year position.
Can you talk about what that position would be? Yep. So CJ White, who is our current streets supervisor, he put in his resignation. He was a great asset to the team, and so we replaced that role. He then had a different, his family situation changed, and he has another opportunity because of the amount of projects we have in public works and a succession planning for the next streets supervisor. Excuse me, I don't know what his previous role was, title. I can't remember what his previous, just be below, maybe it was deputy assistant street supervisor. But because we have a succession plan in place, this is a temporary role as we work toward that succession planning and utilizing CJ's experience to help and broaden the bandwidth of public works over the next 2 years.
So it's public works project.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
And then in human resources, professional services of $20,000. So total one-time expenses of $484,000, which would leave us with a deficit of about $48,000 in the general fund. We also have had a vacancy savings of about $475,000 on average over the last 4 years. So with those things taken into consideration, we feel comfortable with this budget in front of you today.
And I'll just quickly add an additional narrative. So because of our compensation study and the way we've implemented it and what that means in perpetuity for our operating cost, as well as forecasting, which we'll talk about in the moment, in a moment, for our future revenues, we did not approve many FTEs for this coming year. With one exception, and we'll get to that in a moment as well. But because of that, that's why we have some additional professional services. So people that did need additional bandwidth to accomplish some of their projects, getting them the help that they need in a temporary capacity so that they can work through that.
And you guys have seen this graph before, but shows our general fund balance budget in the dark green versus how we actually ended the year in the light green, and the how much different that is. The general fund is the town's primary operating fund, paying for the town's core administrative and operational tasks. So most staffing costs come out of the general fund, other than any staff that works for an enterprise fund such as water, wastewater, and the housing funds. And then open space and affordable housing also come out of those respective funds. We have several types of revenues that go into the general fund. The main revenue source comes from taxes, which makes up 65% of total 2025 budgeted revenues. And that includes sales tax, property tax, use tax, motor vehicle tax, and franchise tax, but most of that tax revenue is sales tax. And then fees include licenses such as business and building licenses, short-term rental licenses, and administrative fee, liquor, tobacco, marijuana, vendor, and animal licenses, and then the festival attendance fee and building permits. Intergovernmental revenue includes cigarette tax, retail marijuana sales. Fines and forfeitures includes traffic fines, municipal code violations, sales tax late fees, and then parks and rec fees include campground, recreation, pool revenue, showers, field and pavilion rentals, and reservation fees. And then just as a reminder, some of those revenues are immediately transferred out to the Reserve Capital Improvement Fund and Open Space Fund. So 15% of our sales and use tax, property tax, and business licenses goes to the Reserve Capital Improvement Fund, and then 5% of those revenues go into the Open Space Fund. So you'll see a pretty large line item under the transfers out that make up 9%. Oh, sorry, this is the revenues. You will see a large item for transfers out due to those transfers into the Open Space and Reserve Capital Improvement Fund. And then there's also some transfers coming into the general fund, which is an administrative fee, which makes up 9% of the total general fund revenues. And these are transfers mainly from our enterprise funds for an administrative fee. And this ensures that utility and enterprise funds pay their fair share of administrative costs. So rates should be set to cover the full operating costs, including administration, which prevents subsidization by the general fund for those funds. And this allocation method applies a percentage of department cost to cover administrative expenses across all funds. Wages and benefits, as well as all other costs of the department, are included in this calculation. All right, we'll move on to some of our big revenue sources, the largest being sales tax revenue. And right now through August, we are 4% up year over year, not including short-term rentals as an even comparison. We're still working really hard to reconcile that. Don't have great numbers yet, but it looks like that's going to be down about 2% year over year. So we are looking at budgeting flat from 2023 actuals and also projecting ending the year flat.
And I'll add just a little bit more to that. So when we look at our projected lodging metrics, which is a good indicator for our sales tax forecasting, right now, and the adjusted RevPAR is the best indicator for that forecasting. We're looking at 14% down year over year. However, this is a comparison to Mountain Village that is looking 6% up. So while we can't guarantee that we're seeing some of those visitors come to Telluride, we can kind of make that assumption. However, I think overall it's looking down in the destination about 6% year over year. And that's similar to flights, which is 6%. So we're going to keep looking as these metrics change prior to our adoption of the budget. So our goal is to get, as Kaylee mentioned at the start of this presentation, to get as much accuracy as we can in those budget forecasts. As we've seen in the past, the revenues is the aspect that we have budgeted conservatively, maybe more heavily. So in order to make that more balanced budget, we'll try to maintain that accuracy. So while this is what we are presenting to you right now, we will be, there might be a potential change prior to the November adoption.
And then our interest revenue is another big line item in the general fund. We have projected a decrease of 100 basis points by the end of 2024, and then another 100 basis points by the end of 2025. And that was after talking to our investment advisors.
Is that
That
based
was our
off of the,
suggestion.
because there has already been a 50-point base
Yep.
reduction already, is it an additional 100 points off of that or 100 points cumulative?
100 points cumulative.
Thank you, Kelly.
And then here's a graph of our sales tax revenues. We were pretty flat from 22 to 23, and then projecting flat this year and next year at just over $11 million total. So 5% of that would go into the affordable housing. Sorry, 0.5% of the 4.5% goes into the affordable housing fund. As far as expenditures go, we have included a 4% merit increase as of July 1st, 2024 for all staff. And then for our insurance line items, we have allocated those differently this year based on the actual cost of insurance for the buildings that are related to each fund and the liability items. And this results in a decrease to the general fund insurance cost. And then we have one new FTE, which is a deputy marshal included in the general fund. So that's a new FTE, and then the school district is interested in paying 50% of the school resource officer position. So
I'll just quickly add to this as well. If you remember, we did add an additional code enforcement officers. We have 3 code enforcement officers. That was at, I would say, the expense of what we had budgeted as a deputy marshal. So this is adding back that deputy marshal position into the budget. We felt comfortable with that, one, because we reduced overtime hours as we will have more staff available, and with the school willingness to pay for half of an FTE that they are currently utilizing. It brought this to almost, it doesn't impact the budget that much.
And then our labor costs are a huge part of the general fund. They're usually between 52 and 55% each year of our total expenses. For our 2025 budget, they're 58% of our total budget. Okay, we'll move on to each department and let them speak to their budget requests. We have included the department mission and service description, which aligns with the town council goals and objectives. And then we'll let each department talk about any notable budget requests for 2025, and we'll start with the clerks.
The main one for the clerk's department request for 2025 is for Cora software. We received, we're up 20% this year with Cora requests. And so it's, in the past, we've looked at software and it didn't seem like it was worth purchasing it, but we're at the point where we think that we really need it to improve our efficiency. So would like to budget $6,800 for that for 2025. And that's really all I'm asking for, with an increase. And then we have our regular municipal election that we budget for every other year. So that's also in the first budget for 2025.
Just out of curiosity, Tiffany, do you know offhand how many core requests we've received in the last year approximately?
To date, I want to say we're at about 55.
So over one a week. And that's year to date, so well over one a week. So, yep, okay.
Yeah, they're getting larger, and as you know, they include things like communication between council and staff. And those communication, anytime we go through emails, it's very time consuming, and the software will help auto redact sensitive information. It creates workflows, invoicing, time tracking. So it's going to be really helpful.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. And I think I saw Delaney online to go over the Community Services Department Facilities Division.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I guess I would start by saying that this is one portion that you will see me for, and then the others are, of course, the enterprise fund. With the addition of the facilities division, that has broadened our budget scope into the general fund. So that's why you're only seeing the facilities division portion today. We really only have one notable budget adjustment, and that is a software and contracted position potentially to help us get all of the facilities onto Asset Essentials so that we can track and have a proactive maintenance approach and regular services needed at all of the town-owned assets, except for those at the Parks Department. That's our one big thing.
Thank you, Delaney. And as she mentioned, so the facilities department broadens out into the general fund. So it's not, of course, the entirety, but it is, I think, about 40% of the 6 staff members. Maybe I shouldn't have thrown a percentage out there, but it's an
Yeah,
allocation to the general fund.
Yes, these labor costs are allocated between the general fund and all of our enterprise funds.
And I will invite council to jump in whenever they have questions on these.
Okay, for finance, we have an increase in our annual audit fees. We did have new auditors for our 2023 audit, and part of our 3-year agreement is that fees increase annually. They have been great at helping us just with our financial presentation for our audit and our internal financial statements. And then our software costs increase annually. Our credit card fees have increased partially due to people just using their credit cards more and then going to our monthly utility billing instead of bi-monthly. And then we have a 7% increase for county treasurer fees, which is in line with our property tax revenue increase. And we will move on to Michelle with historic preservation, with all of historic preservation, planning, and building departments.
Yes, Mayor and Council, the main focus of the historic preservation division this year will be completing phase 1 of the update to the historic and architectural survey. The last survey was done in 2013, and we should be doing that update every 10 years. So that's the main focus of this coming year. And in terms of budget adjustments, We have the 10% increase that's done every other year. And we also are looking at that first phase of the historic and architectural survey, spending about $50,000. And then also split among the 3 divisions in the department, the combined historic preservation director and planning director into one position is divided equally among the 3 divisions.
And I'll just add, Michelle, and congratulations that you did submit for a grant for the historic preservation survey. So while we don't know, there might be
Right.
additional revenues coming in for that.
Right, absolutely. It's just under 50,000 that we submitted for. And then for planning, the main focus will be the update to the comprehensive plan. And we have again the 10% increase in fees as done every other year. 335,000 for the comprehensive plan in the budget. And again, the share of the new combined director position. In terms of the building division, their main goal is focused this year is to adopt the 2024 International Code Council Building Code and the 2023 National Electric Code. And only budget adjustment is for that 1/3 of the director position.
And one thing that was in the packet, but we did take it out of the slides because it influences the Affordable Housing Fund, not the general fund, was a fee increase for mitigation. It is jumping from
630 to 902.
So 630 to 902 per square foot. This is a very large jump. So we are currently engaging with EPS as we had additional funds left over from the employment generation study. And they are going to look at that mitigation formulaic approach to see if it still makes sense in from an equity standpoint, as multifamily looks very differently than single dwelling and duplexes. And if they have any more insights from a timing perspective, this will most likely not be complete by the time we talk about this in late October. But our goal is to have something to have us better educated in what we should be adopting before our November adoption date. Any questions on that?
Thanks, Michelle. Human resources.
Good morning. Okay, HR is going to continue efforts to be the employer of choice in the region, and we are going to turn focus to really creating and implementing a robust learning and development plan. We have identified a program called SWORD Inclusion. It is run by a person named Dr. Geraldine Davis, and we're very excited to have her engage with our leadership team beginning of 2025, if approved, to really help foster more inclusive management practices and expand our capability for connection and collaboration, starting top down. We're also looking at some trainings, skill-based for staff to include utilizing software and tools to help with efficiency. So that has been a notable increase that has been asked for in the training budget. Other than that, professional services has been reduced, but it still accommodates the ability to do work on the performance evaluation system. Kaylee mentioned that we're asking for a 4% merit increase in July. Our hope is to move our evaluation process in a way where we would be on a common evaluation date once in the year rather than having them staggered throughout as we do now. So that would be part of that adjustment. And other than that, everything else remains relatively the same. Oh, I guess I should mention the additional professional services support just to help us with some temporary staffing to keep our operations going while we undertake some of our major projects. We're feeling busy and need just a little bit extra bandwidth in our department. And that's it. Thank you.
Zoe, manager's office.
Great. skip over the focuses. We're doing a lot in the manager's office, but really the only changes in the manager's office. So most of our, just a reminder, most of the things that the manager oversees is, you know, the capital projects and those are in a different budget. But we do have our two staff members. Thank you, Darren and Lindsay. Lindsay's work comes mainly out of the Lodgers Fund and Darren's work mainly comes out of the Sustainability Fund. Actually, what is that fund called?
It's in the general fund.
Yes, but his
Oh,
work
yeah.
is out of what's that fund? I call it
The
sustainability, but it's the
Energy mitigation.
Energy Mitigation Fund. Thank you. However, the main adjustments that you'll see is just to show a better reflection of historical actuals. So we're going to be reducing the travel and training and the books and subscriptions budget while modestly increasing the software support to meet the evolving operational needs. I also looked at town council's budget and reduced the travel and training and business expense, just again to better reflect past spending patterns. And so overall, we're seeing a slight reduction from 2024 as presented in 2025. Great. You'll hear more from these two when we talk about the other funds. You can run away.
Yeah.
Oh, no, IT. Okay, well, you can stay.
No, I took them out of the general fund since they are not applicable to the general fund.
It was great seeing you guys.
Thanks, sorry. Okay, information technology is John there?
See, he's got an easy commute, so he can just come right out.
If there's, from my perspective, there was a considerable change for this year's budget, but it's mostly from a hardware standpoint, from a communication standpoint with regard to some of the wireless infrastructure we're doing away with. We're trying to move to fiber, reduce the overall costs in communications. We are keeping close track of our expenditures for software and licensing, leasing computers and whatnot, because I think some of that got a little bit loosey-goosey through the year. So we went through a complete audit of all of our licensing expense, Microsoft Office 365 expense, and reduced a lot of that. So for the most part, from my perspective, it was down a considerable amount, and then we have this modest increase that we've added of 3%, but the overall reduction from what was in the 2024 budget is just like $132,000 less, really.
If we had an award, John would win it.
Yes.
So thank you.
So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, John.
Great work.
That's great.
We'll commute back tomorrow.
Oh, I did leave sustainability,
Well,
but
you can skip this
we should
then.
probably talk about that one with the Energy Mitigation Fund.
Yes, we'll talk about that in the Energy Mitigation Fund.
Legal.
Thanks. I'll keep this a brief introduction, Mayor and council members. So the notable change, I think, for 2024, the end of the year through 2025, is the addition of a third attorney in our office. Some of you may have already met Mr. Jason Wilson at the THA meeting. We'll have a formal introduction next Tuesday. You'll remember this is based on the retirement of Lauren Bloomsma and looking at that legal assistant position that we had and realizing maybe some of those administrative tasks could be absorbed through a shared position, perhaps. Probably shared with the manager's office, but then devoting significant resources to bringing in a third licensed attorney into the office. So we have implemented that. Just started on Tuesday, Mr. Wilson, and he does have a Cora focus, which we just had that interesting discussion about how Cora requests have increased. So we think that this will be a very purposeful and logical fit for the town attorney's office. Any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Great.
Oh, the narrative, by the way, is on page 10 in your packet material. I wanted to look at that in particular.
Thank you, Kevin.
Sure.
We'll let Josh speak to the Marshal's department. Zero.
Good morning, everybody. So we had some increases in our professional services, travel, training, and uniform. The big change is going to be in the travel and training area. In recent years, we've always been able to apply for reimbursement from post grants for our region. The last few years, that the amount of money being allocated to our region has significantly decreased. So the departments are having to take on more of that burden for travel and training. We're hopeful that they'll start ticking up a little bit, that we can continue to apply for reimbursements, but allowing our guys to travel and train has been a huge benefit to our department and to our community. With that, Sergeant Lundy's applying for a pretty prestigious leadership class that would really benefit our department to have him attend that. It's not a guarantee he'll get in, but we did budget for that should he get in. As our staffing increases, and then with the festivals being able to take on more private security, we've decreased our need for reserve officers, which has decreased our need for reserve housing as well as the pay. So we reflected that with a decrease in next year's budget. We've also decreased our overtime requests due to hopefully an increase in staffing as well. And also another big change is going to be in what we're budgeting for our dispatch services in the last few years. We've really been making a concerted effort to try to take away some of the burden that we're putting on dispatch. Being able to dispatch ourselves to our own calls via computer rather than having to call into our dispatch is one, which will help kind of decrease what we owe dispatch. So that was a significant drop this year from last year's budget.
And then there is a note on here also about the parking fines and fees, but that revenue goes into the parking fund. So we'll talk more about that Tuesday with the enterprise funds.
Just real minor thing, Josh, and it's more on the implementation than budget side. I know at Silverjacks, the license plate reader had a number of issues, and I believe we actually removed it. Is that correct? Or I might be misremembering.
So we're working with IT. It's more of a connectivity issue, and they're doing a lot to improve the connectivity into that.
My memory was saying that it was just too inconsistent just because of,
That's a different idea.
bike racks or snow or mud on license plates, and it ended up being not incredibly effective. So I was just wondering how that factored into the new license plate readers. I think that we've been talking about for over a year now. We've been talking about implementing that for quite some time. So I just wanted to hear any thoughts you had on that, Josh. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, the Silverjack license plate reader has actually been working fairly well. The issues we're having is with people paying to park down in Silverjack. So that's what Zoe's speaking to, working on the connectivity issues. But when the people are paying, the license plate readers have actually been working fairly well. What we're looking to implement, and this is coming out of the parking issue, is going to be putting on a license plate reader on a code enforcement truck that can help with the enforcement a little bit quicker. So we're still looking at that, and that's going to be budgeted for next year. It's just not coming out of the marshal's budget.
Okay, thank you. Just make sure that, no pun intended, it's on your radar.
That absolutely is. Yep.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, we'll move on to Parks and Recreation Department.
Morning, Mayor and Council. So we did notify some case members, Parks and Rec Commission members, and event organizers of this discussion. You guys are cruising right along, so we may or may not have them attending, but we wanted to be sure they knew this discussion was happening because it affects those two boards in various ways and events as well. So just quickly, there's 3 divisions of the Parks and Rec Department. I'm going to speak to each of them separately. And a reminder, there's a lot of talk about fees. The majority of fees associated with the Parks and Rec Department do get reviewed and approved annually at the Parks and Rec Commission level. But I am going to give you an overview of all the work they've done in the past year, because it was a big talking point during last year's budget, and we've done a lot since then. Generally speaking, for the department as a whole, in 2024, we are exceeding the approved 2024 budget revenue goals for the year. And that's among all the divisions combined. And we are also showing significant savings in some areas, non-personnel related operating expenses. So with the comp study implementation, personnel has definitely been a higher expense, but if we take that out of the equation, we are saving money this year. And we are also looking at next year, projecting increased revenues compared to this year. And once again, having savings in our non-personnel operating expenses. So just wanted to put that out on the forefront. The first division is the recreation division. Notable items to talk about would be on the revenue front, those program fees. So whether it's youth soccer or adult hockey, those program fees are continuously reviewed by Ryan and Kurt and other staff members, and to align it with our pricing philosophy, which is the next slide. So we do that on an annual basis at the department level, and Parks and Rec Commission gets involved sometimes as well. On the expenses for the rec division, there is a 2% to 5% cost escalator across most of our accounts, and that's due to inflation. There's more significant change to the clothing allowance, and we did align this with the other departments that have this for people's work clothes. So clothes that might get dirty or need to be extra durable. That budget has not been adjusted since at least 2012. So a 20% increase to reflect actual cost of goods is proposed, in addition to receiving a boot allowance annually instead of every 2 years. There's a separate account for recreation equipment now, which previously was coming out of the adult rec account. We have a different revenue sharing model for the pavilion ads commission. This is the dasher board ads in the rink, in addition to the Zamboni and the in ice as well. So rather than us collecting that information and sharing it back, it's now the sport clubs are collecting the revenue and then giving us a portion of it. So there's no change to the bottom line, but that is a different model for revenue sharing. We also have increased expenses for referees and umpires because we are now consistently requiring paid umpires for all adult sports. The volunteer model was just not working. So that does come with additional expenses, and we do pass those on to the participants as program fees as well. And then on the staffing front, no new positions, but we are looking to transition our rec event aide, which is a shared position, into a higher pay grade to be more of a coordinator position, because the job and our evolving needs reflect a higher level of responsibilities. So that would be the recreation division. This is just our pricing philosophy for programs. This is what Parks and Rec Commission looks at annually. We subsidize youth programs, and we aim for 100% cost recovery on adult programs. So that's just more informational. And then we go into our facilities and maintenance division. We've got several goals in this division, which Ryan leads a lot of those with the assistance of the Parks division. So for revenues, this division for this year we found several new revenue generating measures. One is a rental fee increase for the fields, pools, and pavilion. There was also an increase for showers, campground, pool, indoor ice rink usage. And then we were looking to update the stage and catering facility rental fees, but we have not gotten into that yet. That'll be an item for next year for 2025. For 2025 revenues, there's already been approved a 5% increase in campground fees, and Parks and Rec Commission took action on that in August. And they're looking at those fees annually and making modest adjustments on an annual basis to reflect the high demand, but also trying to keep it affordable for people to utilize. As I just stated, we're looking to adjust the stage and catering facility rental fees in 2025 as well. And then we'll continue to look at fees for facility use per our pricing philosophy, which will be on the next slide for a quick glance. On the expense side, once again, a 2 to 5% cost escalator across most accounts for inflation. Same adjustment for the clothing allowance that I spoke to earlier. And then we've added back in the youth center operation, GL, which was there for a while when we operated Voodoo, and now is back in for the shed. So do you want to speak to that real quick on how that's budgeted?
Yep. So we are budgeting to do 1/3 of the communities that care cost for their operations to both program the facility, but they're also going to be the umbrella managing all of the other nonprofit use. And then we are going to be allocating and paying for all of our utilities over there, but we will be recovering equal portions from all the contributing governments on that as well. And there's a little bit of maintenance cost.
All right, and then no staffing changes for this division is being included either. So this is just an example of a facility rental pricing philosophy. This is for our most complicated facility, the pavilion, and this is something that we'll work on for stage and catering in the upcoming year. All right, and then we'll move into the special events division. So this is the first year that we're formalizing this as an official division. This is something that I've been aiming for say 10 years, and now's the time that we're starting to implement it. It's a phased approach, of course, but to have dedicated staffing and associated budgeting for this special events division, which handles case in addition to all the special event use of town property. So in 2024, there was we've generated approximately $40,000 in additional revenue based on the fees that both council helped us implement during the 2024 budget, and that Parks and Rec Commission has worked on diligently over the past several months. So that encompasses permit fees, which now every event that operates on town property or provides a permit fee, and that's a tiered system based on the size of events, and that's included in your fee resolution with no change for next year. We would suggest adjusting that every 3 years so that events can plan accordingly. And then the other items that were handled at the Parks and Rec Commission level is we implemented a lost campground revenue for major events. So Bluegrass and Blues and Brews pretty much bought out the campground and paid us whatever our revenue of full capacity would have been on a daily basis. So that was a significant increase in revenue coming into Parks and Rec. We also implemented a phased approach on utility billing. And that's the policy that Parks and Rec Commission approved is for multi-day events. And it's also for a select few facilities at this point, the ones that we could easily track utilities on. And that's the pavilion, stage and catering, and the washstand and vendor row. And then also there was increases to the pavilion rental fees, which impacted some events as well. For 2025, this is our 5-year mark of making inflationary adjustments to the admission fee. So inflation between 2020 and 2004 was 21.4%. So that's a big jump. The municipal code dealing with admission fees specifically has a section saying that council through the annual budget process should be adjusting the admission fee based on the inflationary adjustment for the prior 5 years. So we are at that point. It doesn't require you to change the municipal code related to admission fees, but it does say that it's time to adjust it. So that's a significant increase. Events, I think, have been expecting it, but also when we are adjusting it every 5 years, it's a large spread. The last time we adjusted it, it was about 8%. So this is the third year now that we are doing this the third round of every 5-year adjustment. So that's going to be a significant increase, and that is in your fee resolution that would get approved of what those new values are. I also have a graph that we can look at that shows how that fund has increased over time. It's the next one.
Sorry, to stop you there, Stephanie. I could go either way. Is your preference to continue to have that length of time for that inflationary adjustment? When you see an increase of in excess of 20%, does that still feel appropriate for you, or would you prefer to do it on a shorter timeline and thus have more frequent, smaller adjustments?
I don't have a strong preference. I think not wanting to revise the municipal code would be a reason to stay at the 5-year mark. And I talked that through with some of the major events yesterday. I think the last 5 years, I'm not an economist, but I would assume the inflation we saw in the last 5 years was a unique situation post-COVID, but I don't know. I don't track that kind of stuff, but you can see that in 2015 was the first time that we went off of inflation. So that jump was what that is percentage wise, where else, but and then 8% was the time before that. But when we adjusted in 2015, we had never made an inflationary adjustment. That was the first year we did. So that was when our biggest jump was. And then you can see we've kind of been going up gradually. And the different colors are based on the size events because it's a tiered system.
I would say the one argument in my mind to doing a more frequent adjustment is that in the years that we don't adjust, we lose out to inflation where we are, you know, the cost of everything else is going up, but we are still collecting the same amount. So I don't know if it's necessarily my top priority, but it's something to consider if we continue to see tighter budgets, that this might be something in the future we want to adjust more frequently.
I think that's a good point, Tim.
You would also make up for it if it goes down as well. You know, it's kind of just an up and down kind of thing that's tough to predict.
Right. So it's a cumulative adjustment. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's a year where it was higher and then a year that's lower and then waiting that 5 years. But
I think if we get, I think the emphasis of that is if we do get to a place where our operating costs are unattainable and our revenues not meeting those for some huge inflationary reason, then it might be worth looking at the municipal code to see what tools we have. But at this point, I don't think we have seen that in the way that we have it functioning right now. But that's a good point, Dan, for us to keep in mind.
So that's the admission fee. A few other event related fees that Parks and Rec Commission is wanting to continue kind of our phased approach of implementing additional facility use fees. The Warner Field use, and whether that's just for camping on Warner Field because it's an ancillary use of a event happening elsewhere in the park, or whether it's all events happening on the fields. That's something that we don't have a solution for, but it's something that we want to work with Parks and Rec Commission and our event partners on developing a fee structure to get some revenue back on the use of those fields, and especially in relation to the lack of public use of the fields during those event times. As Teddy knows, that's been a discussion topic for a while. And then also we want to continue to expand our utility billing process to include some additional facilities as well in 2025. And we will continue to look at event fees. This is the pricing philosophy that Ryan presented to Parks and Rec Commission in May, and there was general buy-in by the board and by events. There's a lot of footnotes on the bottom of all the different variables like finding or capital contributions to facilities and other factors that events have brought up as being a necessary. And then always trying to find that balance of cost recovery, but also keeping events accessible to the general public and to not price people out of attending an event on town property. So we've done a lot of work. Ryan's taken the lead on a lot of this and has done an excellent job, and Parks and Rec Commission has really pulled up their sleeves and dove into this multiple times. And I think overall events are, they understand the need for more fees, but they want to be sure that we're doing it strategically and in a phased approach, and always looking at that crossover of the admission fee, facility use, and making sure we're not taking more money than we need to or should be taking. So it's complicated. And then on expenses for special events, we moved several accounts over from the rec division. So accounts that are specific to July 4th operations, for example, now fall within this special event division instead of recreation. On the staffing front, we're looking to make a transition from our special events coordinator position to a more of a managerial role. So same general structure, but some additional responsibilities to reflect the evolving needs of our special events operations and supervision. July 4th, I wanted to talk about briefly. This is a event that crosses over a few different funds. So specific to the general fund and the Parks and Rec management of it, all the crowd management costs fall within this division's budget. That would be the insurance, resource recovery, sanitation. We also provide a donation to the volunteer fire department from this budget as well for the fireworks. So to help go towards their expenses associated with purchasing the fireworks. And then there's additional funding for the concert and the drone and laser show, and all that comes out of the Lodgers Fund. So we do have a comprehensive budget of what all that costs, but it does hit a few different funds. And then finally, Case. Case is not asking for any additional funds this year. They are happy with their 2024 budget levels. Then grants were due last Monday, so we actually have confirmed that the number of applications and the grant request totals align well with what the budget request is, which is no growth from last year. So feel good about where that is, and Case will be working diligently on that grant process with their recommendations to you in January.
Stephanie, Brian.
Questions for us? Here's just the Case funding history over a long period of time. 2025 is not on there, but it would be flagged.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank
We will let Kyle speak to the Public Works Department now.
Good morning, Mayor and Town Council. I'll speak on behalf of the Street and Utility Division, just kind of identifying some of the notable 2025 budget adjustments. Overall, for 2025, we do have an overall increase with the 2024 budget. Mainly those are related to the salary adjustments, as well as we did a general ledger increase by 3% just to capture inflation and growing costs that are industry-wide. And so those did increase, but there are a few notable general ledgers that did decrease quite a bit. Just between the vehicle maintenance and equipment rental, we reduced that by 38,000, mainly because of the approval of the increase of the vehicle replacement program. That was much appreciated to get rid of some of those high dollar 1990 heavy equipment that were very high in maintenance, and as well as a lot of downtime, and we had to have a lot of rental costs associated with that equipment. So with that new equipment in, we reduced those numbers down, and hopefully we'll keep being able to do that as we continue to replace some of the older equipment. And then as well as some of the other departments, an increase in the clothing. And then for us, the CDL physical went up just because we are seeing we're actually becoming fully staffed. I think we just have one vacancy at this point in time, which is super exciting. So those few items will increase just because we're almost fully staffed at this time. And that's really all I have to note for budget adjustments for streets and utilities.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? So I guess a huge thank you to staff for preparing a very good presentation that proactively addressed any of your questions. And I think this is the record because it's not even 10 o'clock yet.
It's not a question, but one thing I just want to happily note that I was happy to see in there, there's a 4% merit increase in there, and I'm really happy to see that the CPI for the last year ending in August is at 2.5% according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that does mean we can continue to support our staff, help them get ahead, and really show how much we value our hardworking and dedicated staff that all of us at council really appreciate, and which without we could do nothing.
A huge thank you to that, Dan. I really appreciate that. And I don't know if Julie wants to talk any more about that.
Staff real quick, because it is an important note. Thank you, Dan. I really do appreciate your continued advocacy for staff. It's noted and heard, so appreciate it. CPI is definitely at that number. We look at that. We also, more importantly, look at the cost of labor. We talked about that a little bit during the compensation study. That's going to be our bigger metric because the cost of labor and the cost of living, while they should match up, never do. So we did talk with the consultant prior to diving into this budget process to understand what she's seeing across other municipalities and their intended plan, and also the general increase in cost of labor for 2025. And she felt comfortable that a 4% merit for us and not doing a cost of labor in 2025 would still keep us well on track and ahead. For future years, we will probably bring council both a cost of labor and a merit, and those numbers might look different, but for 2025, this was a consideration and something that we looked into before we brought this number to council. So
I
worth
do want you to
noting.
get a little more granular on the purpose of a cost of labor versus a merit and what that is supposed to do for our staff.
You bet.
Moving through the process.
So cost of labor is what's going to continue to shift our compensation structure, and also people's salaries or compensation within that structure correspondingly, in the years that we're not doing a full comp study where we're looking at the market. So that's intended to keep people moving through the compensation plan and not falling behind like had been happening in past years where we saw these compression issues and just general issues within comp plan administration that we had to do this large correction with through this place and range analysis. So that's going to be our effort for ongoing prudent compensation plan administration forward to make sure that we're keeping in line with the cost of labor, and that's reflective in both our compensation structure and the pay of our staff correspondingly. And then the merit is going to be what may or may not be tied to performance directly, but it's going to just be another way to get people increases in pay.
And moving through the grade.
Yeah.
Yep. So those that have tenure here will get rewarded for that tenure instead of falling behind.
Yep.
As we have seen. Well, thank you for that point.
You want a little more information on cost of labor? I peeked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers this morning as of June, and they're seeing for local government or public sector, not local government, public sector, the cost of labor, including benefits, is running around 62% versus the private sector at around 71%. So if we're at 58, we're still about in line or doing a little better than the average.
Thank you, Julia. Didn't ask for a lesson, but you got one.
And then Tiffany, we do have a hand up.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute Kirsten.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for letting us participate. And I'm Chief of Staff with the Telluride Film Festival, and please course correct me if this question is intended for a different forum, but I would love to understand like the nuance, understanding what drives the fee. Is this the appropriate space to discuss like the nuance of the passes that are issued associated with volunteer efforts versus the ticketed passes, if you will?
Coming up, so this does feel like a question, obviously, for Parks and Rec and Parks. No, it's not. Okay.
So I think what Kirsten's asking is specific to the admission fee section of the municipal code.
I see.
And that allows up to 15% for complimentary passes that then the town doesn't apply the fee to. And then how that gets reconciled and stuff, it happens at the staff level. So I think there's consensus not to touch the municipal code and to stick with the 5-year adjustment for now. Look at it if inflation is outpacing or whatever the right term is. But if it's how we interpret or apply the 15%, that's handled at the staff level, and happy to talk offline on that. So if I understood your question correctly.
Excellent. I think you did. Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or? Zoe, do you have anything else?
Again, a huge thank you to staff.
Thank you so much.
Council.
Thorough, awesome. We really appreciate all the efforts you put into it. Thank you. If there's not anything else, we can move quickly.
Don't be scared. It's
surprised.
okay. This is great.
And then I will just adjourn by mutual consent.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, guys.
It's a little surprising.